Hello viewers. Today we are going to talk about Minamata, the Victims and Their World, a Japanese documentary released in 1971, directed by Noriaki Tsuchimoto. Before going into the details, let's look at the background of this documentary. Minamata disease is a pollution-induced disease which was first officially confirmed on 1st May 1956. Methyl mercury contained in the wastewater discharged from the Chiso Minamata chemical factory was consumed by fish and shellfish in Minamata Bay, which were then consumed by humans. This damaged their central nervous systems. Common symptoms included sensory impairment of the extremities of all four limbs, lack of bodily control, constriction of the visual field, and hearing disorders triggered by damage to the central nervous system. While the degree of severity varied among patients, those with the extreme form of this disease developed symptoms very rapidly and often met quick physical deterioration and abrupt death. Now, this film focuses on the residents of Minamata and nearby communities who suffered damage to their central nervous systems and also who were born with severe defects, the Minamata disease. Their struggle for recognition, reparation, and justice. The film shows the severe condition of the victims, the hardship of their families, and the discrimination they had faced from other Minamata residents. It also shows the inadequate response by Chiso, the reluctant government action, and the problems faced by victims who were not officially designated as affected by Minamata disease. Now let's take a quiz. Which company was responsible for the Minamata disease? Choices are A. Mitsubishi, B. Fuji, C. Chiso, D. Sumitomo. These four are the major chemical factories in Japan, and obviously you know the answer, it is C. Chiso. The content of the film is a series of interviews that Tsuchimoto covers a range from fishermen and the elderly to children born with congenital Minamata disease. The ranges in severity and symptoms of the disease manifested differently in each person are shown in detail. He also portrays the immense love of the caretakers and the guardians for the victims, as well as their worries about the victims' futures when their families pass away. Now, before the actual cause of the disease was identified, people believed that this disease was contagious. Consequently, the victims and their family members were ostracized by the community. Tsuchimoto humanizes them by showing how some families make the most out of their situation and that rehabilitation is possible. To achieve this, the film puts effort to understand their lifestyle, their traditions, and particularly their close relationship with the sea. The last part of the film vividly captures the effort of victims and their supporters to buy shares of Chiso in small quantities. This was strategically done so that they can attend the annual stockholders meeting and thereby confront the corporate leadership. During the meeting, the Minamata demonstrators tried to address the managers and directors of Chiso, who did not allow them to speak. This triggered agitation in the demonstrators, and they crowded around the directors on the stage, though there was no violence. Through heart-wrenching tirades, they express their demands for recognition and reparations and acceptance by the company of the deadly crime they committed. Tsuchimoto very effectively conveyed his message of demanding justice through such powerful scenes. Now let's have an idea about the background of the director himself. As a communist student activist, Tsuchimoto was angered by Chiso, the government, and medical institutions for being complicit in the Minamata disease victims' suffering. He had already used cinema to portray the lives of Tokyo taxi drivers in his breakthrough film On the Road. So, supporting the Minamata disease victims' struggle for recognition and reparations through cinema was a spontaneous response from Tsuchimoto. Consequently, Minamata, the victims, and their world could not find any sponsors for funding. Producer Ryutaro Takagi crowdsourced most of the fund to produce this documentary. This is one of the early examples of a crowdsourced film finding worldwide acknowledgement and inspired many other filmmakers. This film was widely recognized and it got many awards. For example, it was screened at many film festivals, both national and international, and won several awards, including the prestigious Film Ducat at the Mannheim Heidelberg International Film Festival. The critic Mark Cousins has selected it as one of 10 documentaries that shook the world. Director Claude Lanzmann stated, "Tsuchimoto is such a marvelous filmmaker, such a rigorous creator, that I followed the film passionately without ever losing the thread," which essentially emphasizes Tsuchimoto's skill in bringing out the humanity of people and bringing their relationship with nature, in this case the sea, to life. Tsuchimoto followed up this documentary and continued in a documentary series with the films like Minamata Disease, a trilogy, and the Shiranui Sea, which have been very successful as well. With several recent environmental disasters in mind, such as the March 2011 Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster, Tsuchimoto's documentary continues to be highly relevant and brings up the boiling issues such as lack of government and corporate responsibility. Now let's take another quiz. The first International Film Festival award received by Tsuchimoto for Minamata, the victims, and their world was held in A. Cannes, B. Mannheim Heidelberg, C. Berlin, D. Venice. I am sure you got the answer. It is B. Mannheim, Heidelberg. So now let us take a look at the screenshots from some of the key scenes of this documentary. So this one is the city of Minamata. This is an old footage of the Chiso factory. You can clearly see that how much waste material has been deposited, and it is directly in contact with the water. Tsuchimoto used photographs of some of the persons who died due to the disease, like this young kid at the age of 3. Now in this shot you can see Tsuchimoto himself on the left taking the interview of a supporter of this movement. This is a very early image of a cat who was intoxicated by mercury and behaved very strangely. This was the first indication of the environmental pollution. This is the wife of a diseased patient, and this is her husband. You can see clearly the degradation from this image. A very young girl who died. Now in this image you can see a teenage boy who is so helpless that he can't even walk properly without the help. Here he is with his father. This boy, the same boy, can't even speak properly. Look at the distortion in his hand. This is his close-up. See, he is drooling uncontrollably. A young boy who is completely blind. Still, you can see he is very spirited, because even without vision, he is trying to play a game with a stick and a ball. These are hands from a family where almost everybody were victims of the disease. You can see the hands of the grandfather, his son, and the grandsons. You can see the distortions in their hands. This is a son who cannot speak as well, but still, even with distortions in his limbs, he is trying to play an organ. This is his brother. He is completely deaf, but he still is very much interested in music. He is feeling the music from the vibration of the loudspeaker. You can clearly see the distortion in his ear. Now, many of the Minamata patients were admitted to rehabilitation centers. You can see a boy trying to learn some very simple mathematics. Another boy who couldn't walk. Now he is being trained to walk as much as he can. Another boy, he is being trained to do some exercise. Now this image is from the hand of a lady who was suffering from the Minamata disease. So she went to see the ministry, but the ministers, they refused to listen to her. You can see they are saying, "Shut up." This is the close-up. You can see she is crying, tears are coming out, but she is saying, "I will even fight alone until the last." Now, many of the Minamata victims tried to approach the court for some justice, but in vain, because Chiso, being a very influential company, could do some manipulation there as well. Here at the front you can see an old guy. He is the lawyer Toshio Muramatsu. He used to be a Supreme Court judge. So, using these powerful people, they could easily manipulate the court. So the Minamata victims, they assembled and tried demonstrations in major cities using loudspeakers, and they got public opinion in their favor. More and more demonstrations are shown. Here some money have been collected, donation from the public. These are all spontaneous donations that could help the legal battle between the victims and the company. Here you can see in the demonstration, they are showing the photographs of some of the victims. Here, spontaneous public awareness is shown where common people are signing petition in favor of the victims and also donating money. Here, a nurse carrying her child is shown. This is from a leader of the demonstrators. He is a victim himself. Other victims are listening to his speech tearfully. This is an old person, even having lot of problem, he is still trying to put up some show in front of the demonstrators. Now this is a still from a very critical meeting held by the victims and their supporters, where it was decided that they are going to buy some small shares from the Chiso company so that they can appear in front of the directors during the annual stockholders meeting. These are some examples of the share papers bought by the victims from Chiso. So now they are going to appear in front of the directors. They are traveling by a train. Now they have assembled. See, they are always doing some Buddhist prayer, showing that their intention is completely non-violent. They are discussing with the journalists. Now they have assembled in the meeting place. Now they are within the auditorium. And now they are facing all the board of directors of Chiso. He is the president of the company. But none of the directors are allowing the victims to speak properly. So the demonstrators are using microphones within the auditorium to speak. But in vain, nobody is listening to them. So they get agitated and they enter the stage. They surround the directors, but without being violent. This is the president. He is facing a lady who has suffered badly. See, she is saying, "Can't you understand my feelings?" So all of this was in vain at that time. But some positive outcome appeared, mostly from the struggle of the Minamata demonstrators. It was known all over Japan. And then came, in 1971, Tsuchimoto's work, which was shown in many film festivals all over the world. And then the world came to know. And there was a worldwide opinion against Chiso. So now the Japanese court had to respond, and there was a court order in favor of the victims and obviously against Chiso. This was published in the New York Times and many other world-renowned newspapers. So some quote-unquote from the newspaper report. This was published in 1973, where the court order came. A Japanese court ruled today that a major chemical company was responsible for the mercury poisoning of people in the town of Minamata, which has given its name to a debilitating disease. The district court at Kumamoto on the southwestern island of Kyushu ordered the Chiso Corporation to pay a total of $3.6 million to 138 plaintiffs representing 30 families. The president of Chiso, Kenichi Shimada, said that the ruling would not be appealed. The company makes acetaldehyde, a widely used chemical at its Minamata plant, from which organic mercury waste has been discharged into a nearby bay. In the 20 years since the first death from Minamata disease, the government has determined that 397 persons in Minamata have been victims, of whom 68 have died. I just want to show two shots from the documentary showing the creativity of the director. You can see a shot of the graveyard where the Minamata victims are buried. Now he zooms in and focuses on the flowers coming out of the graves. So there is always a hope. And I finish up with the last quiz. The first court rule holding Chiso for being responsible for the Minamata disease came in A. 1956, B. 1963, C. 2011, D. 1973. And you know the answer, it is D. 1973. Thank you very much for listening.